So I was going to talk about this subject by focusing in on a particular sexual behavior but then only those people with that behavior would recognize it because there's a structure here that I want to talk about that really isn't about specific content, specific fetishes or compulsions in sex, fantasies. There's a structure. And so I'm going to talk about the structure instead of just all the content. Here's the structure of it is I'm speaking loosely, but for those of us who've had or have sex compulsions or issues where our sexuality is unmanageable or causing issues of whatever kind, relationship issues and sometimes health issues, work issues, all those folks that might be listening right now, you've got to find the pervert within. You have to find, discover, make friends with, and integrate the pervert within. And if you don't, that pervert within will keep running the show. Okay, I use the word pervert for a reason, which is that the men, for example, that I work with who have more taboo-ish, less socially acceptable things, like, they're attracted to rape fantasies. And some women are too. They watch rape porn. Or people who are attracted to children. Or some really extreme sex like that I got into, the BDSM, which was always consensual, but still pretty extreme. And just then 1,000 other fetishes that I have learned on Grindr, for example, that you can have a fetish about anything. So it's a wide range of behaviors and interests. But what the structure of it is that, in a sense, we all are driven by, guess, what do you think I think we're driven by most? Shame. Now, that's not the only driver that we found in this work when working with people. We found that what drives these behaviors, making them compulsive, is shame, emotional repression, trauma, and core woundedness, which is deficiency story. And pretty much working with people, those are the areas. And if people go deep into those areas, they start shifting out of the compulsivity. They may still have an interest in that kind of sex, but it's just not compulsive. Let me just share my own experience before I get too outside of that. 3-year sex compulsion towards BDSM, which I've shared with you. The 3 years right after my awakening experience, it was coming as a result of unprocessed trauma and shame that didn't get met and often doesn't get met in a non-dual realization or even a mindfulness practice because it's deep somatic stuff. So it got missed, and then those drivers came forward, and the deviant, I'm just using words like the pervert, came out. And because it was shame-based, I'm going to call him a pervert because that's how I saw it. It's like, who is this pervert that on one hand shows up as like a spiritual teacher pointing people to peace, and then goes, a few hours later is having some wild-ass, crazy, rough sex. I won't even get graphic with you, but there's an identity there. It's identity, and it's really hidden. And we say it's shame-based identity. And so I'm using the word pervert because many of the men who watch these things or do these things, and women, they resonate with the sense of being really dirty or wrong or even disgusting. They have to hide. They might say pervert or deviant or these words. And they're not just mind ideas. These words are deeply connected in the body, programmed into the somatic experience. So this is why I say cognitive work that just tries to rearrange those or think differently about that doesn't really work with addiction, because down deep below in the body where you can't see it, that's where you find these core identities and traumas and repressions. So to the extent that recovery is in the head, forget it because it's not going to go very far in my view. When I say forget it, I mean in my path, forget it. It's not something I'm interested in. I tried that, been there, done that, doesn't work. Might give some reprieve, but it doesn't go deep enough. So finding the pervert within, it takes skill, because the pervert, coming from the shame, this is a hidden entity. This is the, you don't show that side of yourself when you're sitting in a business meeting. You don't just come and say, hey, you should have watched this crazy ass porn that I saw last night. This one guy was doing this to this girl. You don't do that. And so your identity shows up one way with people in social situations, family. But then your identity, some other thing comes up in these private moments, which is not that person who shows up like that socially. It's something else. I'm calling it the pervert, not to reify it, and not to say, oh, there's really a pervert within all of us, because there isn't. There is no pervert or self in here anywhere. But there are selfing programs that arise to certain occasions to sort of accomplish something. And the pervert, or the whatever that identity is, comes up and does a really good job at achieving the goal of acting out on this thing. It's that driver that's driving it. When working with men who, and some women, who've had the desire to be attracted to children but haven't acted out on it, they have come to me, to our centers, and online to work with me. And they've spent their whole life kind of trying to move away from the pervert label, or the dirty, I'm wrong, I'm disgusting. It's like it's there, but because they're not looking at it, it drives the behavior. And then they do the behavior, and then they feel again, I'm perverted, I'm wrong, or something, and then that creates more shame, and then the shame is an aphrodisiac, and it makes you want to go do it again, even if it's just watching porn and not being with children, but just watching porn of children. Every time you feel shame, it reinforces the pervert identity, or the identity there, which then is an aphrodisiac, creating more compulsivity. So it's clear that pushing these thoughts out of our experience is not working. And there's science behind that. There's been studies that have been the last 10 years that have said whenever you suppress desire and thought, wants, emotions, it actually makes PTSD, addiction, depression, anxiety worse. And those are the mental health issues. And then there's a slew of studies that say, oh, and also it creates physical disease. So it may be creating, or at least making worse, physical and mental diseases. And I think the reason that it does that is because we hide these labels from ourselves. So we act out on these identities, these stories, but it's all unconscious. And so we don't get to it. And so we keep acting it out because we're having fun, even if we're feeling a bit bad about what we're doing. We keep doing it. And then what comes up is like, oh, now I've got this body issue. Like a really bad back. Or I've got this pancreatitis now. Or irritable bowel syndrome. Something is happening, or a serious relationship issue, like breakdown of intimacy. You break up because you can't be intimate. Whatever it is, it's like that we pay the price in some way by not looking at these stories and just trying to squirm away from them, hide them in the unconscious, and then act from them. So one of the things we do, and this is just the beginning, really, this is just like basic KI, is we get people just pulling up these labels, these identities, and sitting with them. So for example, we'll have them imagining acting on this fetish or whatever else that they feel shame for. And as we pull it up, I'll say, well, what does this mean about who you are? And then something like, I'm a pervert will come out. And as soon as they see that thought, there's a squirming away, because this is the turning away from that is what keeps the shame in place and keeps the compulsivity going. So what I do with them is I say, just let that word be there in awareness, the pervert, or whatever words go along with that, and just let that be as it is. See it as just a thought arising in awareness with some energy on it. And can you just stay as your true nature and let that be there? Keep it in the light until it falls away, even bringing it up several times and doing that, because that's the opposite of repression right there. Like Dzogchen style looking. In other words, the idea of letting things be as they are, everything arises and falls to awareness, is really good. When you finally pulled it up, it hides from you at first. You might not think to look at, or the word pervert might not arise because there's resistance to it. But with inquiry, you can pull it up, force it up, and then notice the resistance to it. But as you rest with the resistance, that's this trying to squirm away. And you don't squirm away, the thought starts to lose energy. And it starts to fall away, and it shifts the somatic, and it starts to work on the shame. Strangely, by accepting these thoughts fully, we believe them less. Whereas a lot of people think, if I suppress this, I won't believe it and I won't act on it. And science is saying that's actually totally wrong. That if you're suppressing them, that creates more compulsivity. So mindfulness, Dzogchen, Ki, a style of allowing everything, is the medicine. But the issue is that this stuff hides, and so inquiry is a good way of provoking it up so you can rest with it. And I would say that's true of anything. So if you look at yourself watching porn where there's a taboo subject, just ask, okay, so if people saw this, what would they say about me? You're dirty and disgusting. Okay, so chances are you haven't actually witnessed that much, because it's kind of an unconscious thought tied directly to shame. So with KI, we just pull that up. We might say, okay, you're not dirty or disgusting. As you're watching that porn, you're not dirty or disgusting. And then the somatic thing comes up with this thought that says, yes, I am dirty and disgusting. Sometimes it's just energy that comes up. But if you ask, what does this energy mean? It's like, oh, it means I'm dirty and disgusting. And then setting with that, making friends with that word, those words in awareness. There's energy on the words. You'll see it, or you'll notice energy attached to the words. So just staying with those words, you're staying with the body and the mind in one fell swoop there. So you don't have to shift back to body and mind. Just be with the words, welcome them, welcome them, welcome them. And there you're taking the power away from other people there and the name calling, but you're also embodying what you have been trying to run away from, the shame. You're letting that be released, which then has a direct impact on the compulsivity around the thing. And it's similar with the other drivers of being able to reach the unconscious stuff that hides, repression, trauma, bringing that into the light of awareness, lovingly bathing it in awareness, letting it fall naturally. It's not easy work because there's a reward in our sexual behavior, just like our drug behavior. So what I say to people is you have to understand the reward threshold, is what I call it, which is, I want to go watch porn, but I don't feel strongly about it. I'm just going to sit here and do my work. So I don't do inquiry. I just get busy doing my work. But secretly, little thoughts are coming in like, I really want to go watch porn, actually. And as those thoughts come in, the energy gets to a higher threshold. And there's a certain place where the energy gets to a level where it's almost like you can't turn back. It becomes a have to, a compulsion. So what I say to people is, when you start to see these fantasies come up, don't distract yourself. Stop and do this exercise that I'm saying. It's just, if you did this fantasy, what does this mean about you? And then just essentially make love to this thought, like welcome it, like keep it in the space until it just doesn't want to be there. There's going to be energy with it. So by welcoming the thought, you welcome the energy. And then repeat, because these are layers to this. And if you keep repeating, though, it takes the energy out of the compulsion. The only thing I'm saying is don't wait until it gets to like, I have to. So it requires more awareness in your experience to feel into your body and notice when that energy is coming up. And then it takes an earnestness to stop and really look at it. And again, if you don't stop and look at it, what happens is you go to the porn or you have that kind of sex, and it reinforces the programming around shame or deficiency story or trauma. It reinforces it. It makes it feel true, and you got a reward from it, and the reward reinforces. And so it's really important to do inquiry before and after, if you do that thing, to clean up the psyche and the somatic around that. Otherwise, each time you do it, you're just reinforcing it. And this is why people who have been addicted a long time, it's not just the substances they're using, it's the nature of how they're not awake or mindful. And so if you're not awake or mindful, the program becomes really strong. By the time you're 50, it's like you got strong compulsions. 60, even 40, strong compulsions that seem to even not be letting up at all. And in fact, you might even be finding yourself going into deeper taboo subjects to really get that energy going, the compulsive energy. If you want to know more about this, then just come to the members area. That's where we're doing the work in a new model of recovery. The members area is a great place where people just feel free, as long as they do, to share, bare their soul about these things. They don't feel comfortable sharing everything, and they don't have to. But by listening to people being open and honest, it creates an atmosphere of honesty, and it's an atmosphere then that's ripe for real good processing embodiment. So I think it's a really good place, if this is one of your things, to go and just listen to us and learn what we're doing. Thanks.